I'm Tisha Cassida at Rebellion.life. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Joel Salatin from Polyface Farms, who I discovered many years ago while reading the book Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan. I was at that point intrigued by his unique farm operations, and over the years have grown even more fond of Mr. Salatin's keen ability to speak out against some of the atrocities happening in food policy thanks to an overzealous use of government force. He is someone literally on the front lines of fighting back against bad uses of government and force. Mr. Salatin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tisha. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. For a brief introduction of who you are and what you're doing, let me quote your own extremely eloquent self-described statement as a Christian, libertarian, environmentalist, capitalist, lunatic farmer. First of all, I would gladly share in these monikers with you, sans the farmer part. And for our listeners, what exactly do you mean by this?
Well, what I mean by this is that for a long time, as you can imagine, being a kind of beyond organic farmer, I do a lot of speaking with foodies and sustainable ag kind of people, environmentalist types, and love them to death. But what I found was a frustration with pigeonholing me as a liberal Democrat, tree hugger, lover of locking up land and wilderness, and Buffalo Commons, taking away property for endangered species and wetlands protection. Not that I'm against any of all that, but anyway,
Right.
You get where I'm going.
Right.
And of course, along with that becomes, you're supposed to be in favor of all the government quote unquote safety nets, from healthcare to Social Security to minimum wage protection to OSHA to EPA to government education, institutional education. So I'm supposed to be in favor of all the teachers getting a bigger raise, and yada yada yada. And so finally, not to mention, I'm supposed to be in favor of abortion and all sorts of things.
Right.
And so finally, just to come right out front instead of being kind of defensive about where some of my eclectic leanings were, I just developed this, Christian environmentalist Christian libertarian environmentalist capitalist lunatic monitor to help broaden the understanding that wait a minute, I am all about creation stewardship, but that doesn't mean I am in favor of doing it through government edict or agency or regular or bureaucracy, and I do this because I'm a Christian, not because I worship the earth, but because I worship the Creator of the earth, and that gives me a stewardship mandate that's not as dissimilar as you might think to some of the environmentalist agenda. The difference is that we do it for a greater power than ourselves, rather than just doing it because the earth is the earth.
Sure.
So anyway, that was and my libertarian, of course, was to try to distance me a little bit from what I saw as the overbearing and overarching agenda of many in this kind of environmentalist foodie community, which is in favor of pretty much every government program that comes down the pike.
Right.
And I think that the government is kind of the remedy of least resort rather than the remedy of first resort.
Absolutely. Well, I have huge appreciation for, combining all of those things together, because it is so unfortunate how people in our society can pigeonhole you based on just certain political or philosophical or religious beliefs. And instead of doing that, we should really be having this conversation about what we're doing as people to create solutions to our problems and get rid of a lot of these labels that automatically stop the conversation from ever even starting.
Yes, absolutely. And lest anybody just misread me here, realize that when I say I'm an environmentalist, I'm trying to separate myself from my libertarian friends, who I think too often too often don't appreciate, discussions about the value of the commons
Sure.
and the right of people to the commons. And so I think sometimes, I mean, I've heard libertarians say, well, of course we're in favor of Earth first, exploit the Earth and then let's go on and exploit the planet. That's such a crazy, I mean, I don't even have words to describe how stupid that is, and yet, I've heard that from my libertarian friends, and as if, nothing ever wears out, and we're not supposed, and as if God doesn't want a return on investment. He created it and set a sun up there. So what we're supposed to be doing is, the Earth is supposed to be on a biomass weight gain program, a soil building program, an earthworm proliferation program. It's not supposed to be on a soil depletion, earthworm depletion, and weight depletion program. So, so my, the environmentalist part of that speaks to, what I think are some of the weak spots of the religious right, the Christian community, as well as the libertarian community.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, let's dive right into what makes you tick and what makes you fight back with your farm and what you're doing to inspire people to bring common sense into this discussion about what we're doing to fight back against this industrial food complex. So, Mr. Salatin, do you feel like we have the power to beat big government and big business? And how do we tackle this here in our own communities?
Well, it's such a great question. And certainly I do think we have the power to beat big government, and in our own communities. I think that the answer, however, is not regulation from the top down. Many people who are just as opposed to, for example, the agenda of Monsanto, not only the agenda but the actual modus operandi of Monsanto, where if some of their patented life forms waft across the fence and have a promiscuous orgy with my plants and happen to impregnate my plants with their life forms, rather than them paying trespass violations, I have to pay them for the privilege of their life forms, trampling my rose bushes, if you will.
Right.
And that is an obscene. It's an obscene view toward personal sanctity, toward your the home is your castle, and your curtilage is a safe place, a la the Fourth Amendment, the right to the protection from search and seizure, and to be safe in our homes and our effects. And so it violates all that, and many of my my very liberal friends agree with basically Monsanto is the enemy, is the devil, blah blah blah. But what they see as an answer is, well, let's make an agency of the government that will regulate Monsanto. And the problem is we have done that. We've done that over and over and over for the last 150 years, ever since Abraham Lincoln started the USDA, and I call it the US duh. And of course,
appropriately.
In my estimation, Abraham Lincoln was the worst president, followed by probably Franklin D. Roosevelt, followed by Teddy Roosevelt, and maybe Abraham Lincoln's tied up there with Woodrow Wilson, who gave us the League of Nations, the Internal Revenue Service, and all that. So anyway, the great presidents are the ones you never hear about because they just went along and adhered to the Constitution. Man, that's boring.
It is boring. Unfortunately.
I mean, it's a lot more exciting to violate the Constitution. That gets a lot more publicity.
Sure.
But anyway, the difference is that the problem is that we have tried the top-down approach for a long time, and all that it gives us is a more big business government collusion, fraternity, if you will, that creates an orthodoxy that actually, although created arguably with great intention, has a result of actually hurting innovation, decentralization, freedom, liberty, and personal choice.
Right.
And that's the truth. And so, how do we fight back? How we fight back is by individually disempowering the, whatever your view of, the evil thing is, withdraw support from it. That means that you don't vote for politicians who vote for special concessions like, farm subsidies and special concessions to Monsanto, whatever. You know what that means? That means often Republicans as bad as Democrats.
Right.
What it means is, even more than that, though, is that in your personal life, you don't go to you don't patronize the kind of food businesses that either benefit from the government largesse or who get their products from farms that destroy the environment or sources that abuse all these principles of freedom, liberty, and life.
Right.
And what that means is that you got to put some effort on it. I think where I want to go with this conversation, I want to end up with, it ain't easy.
Right.
And changing, flowing, swimming against the stream is never easy.
Right.
And so if you just go to the supermarket and get whatever's on the shelf with the brand name or whatever's advertised on television, you're going to actually be aiding and abetting the system, if you will, the fraternity, the orthodoxy, that thrives on nutrient deficiency, on resource depletion rather than replenishment, and that thrives on running roughshod over freedom of choice among people to purchase the food of their choice from the farm of their choice.
Right, right. The power of as a consumer is fantastic. And in our last That's Natural, I had said that, to that effect, is why on earth would we keep throwing money at policymakers, like with when we try and fight back against Monsanto with the statewide labeling requirement? Well, Monsanto is most likely going to be able to outspend us, but instead of throwing money at policy like that, let's give money to farmers who then actually grow the food that we're consuming, and by doing that, we are taking away from benefiting that industrial food complex and benefiting all those negative things that we don't want. It's how we consume and how we purchase, and like you said, it's hard and it's different and it takes more time, but ultimately that's very powerful.
Yeah, it's so much easier to sign a petition and then grab a Happy Meal.
Exactly.
Than it is to actually think about what you're going to eat, create your own home, your own domestic larder. We don't even use that word anymore, larder. What store food? Store real unprocessed food in the home. But that that is the you cannot really extricate yourself or vote. I'm going to say viscerally, if you will, if you don't start voting viscerally with your own life and your own actions.
Right.
And so I would suggest, instead of signing the petition, get in your kitchen.
There you go.
Or go visit your farmer or whatever. In fact, I just finished a manuscript, another book. It'll be book number 10. The title is "Pigness of Pigs, Does God Care?" And it's essentially an ethics, an environmental ethics lesson for the religious right, keyed directly to, creation, earth stewardship for the evangelical community, which supposedly numbers 34% of the American population. And our churches are already being used. You've got buildings, you've got plumbing, infrastructure. Many of them have kitchens,
Right.
and a whole group of people, a fellowship of people that are coming, routinely to a place. Well, why can't our churches, for example, adopt half a dozen or 10 farmers in their community that are producing
Right.
integrity food God's way, building soil, honoring creation's template, if you will, not feeding dead cows to cows, and
Right.
not poisoning the planet, and essentially adopt 6 to 10 farmers who will supply all the church families with their food. Then nobody has to go to the supermarket and patronize Monsanto, and instead people plow their money right back into the community. Trust me, any church which actually adopted this policy would drive the liberals and the earth muffins crazy, because what would they say? Here's a church that cares about the planet. Oh no, what are we going to do? Rewind.
Right. Cognitive dissonance.
Yeah. It's absolute. It doesn't compute in our world, and so these are some of the things that I address in the book. I mean, there's a lot of encouragement, but a lot of challenge, hard stuff in there to challenge the faith community. I'll just use the broad term faith community to appreciate the kind of cultural equity that we could create if we actually took seriously what I'll call creation stewardship.
Absolutely. Well, that is very exciting, and I'll be looking forward to reading that for sure. So you'll have to keep us updated on when it's out and when we can buy it.
Good.
And on that note of, supporting farmers and producers, I know, quite a few people in my generation and the generation coming up that are very interested in becoming farmers. And as you know, it's sometimes difficult. But for our farmers and producers listening to this right now, what are first steps and words of encouragement to figure out solutions to fighting back against bad regulations and other barriers to entry that make people question whether or not they should be a farmer or producer? Is there any light you can shed on that subject to kind of encourage us that we should keep working towards becoming farmers and becoming stewards?
Yeah, it's another great question, and some of your listeners may not know that I've written a book. The title is "Everything I Want to Do Is Illegal."
Okay.
And that book documents many of our battles over the 30 years that we've been doing this with bureaucracy. But it's not all negative. I have in there numerous things that you can do to ease some of these regulatory requirements.
Okay.
And there are lots of what I'll call kind of guerrilla end runs, if you will, to get around some of these things. One is, of course, CSA, community supported agriculture, where rather than selling product, you let your customers invest in the farm. The beauty of that is that it is not a sale. Where the regulations kick in is the phrase "in commerce" or "sale." And in other words, you can give away raw milk. You can make all the quiche and homemade egg noodles you want in your kitchen and give them away to all your neighbors, friends, and even put them in the fire department bingo prize pool. But if any of those people who receive the benefit of your food gift says, "Wow, this is good. I'd like to buy some of this," and comes to you and you take money for it, then suddenly you're a criminal.
Right.
So the first thing you have to understand is that these laws are not about food safety. They're about regulating access to the market.
Right. Right.
And so if we can figure out a way to not have them, quote unquote, in the market, then it becomes a thing that the bureaucrat can't get his head around. And one of those is community-supported agriculture. In milk now, with raw milk, we're seeing a proliferation of herd shares, where states like Virginia, where we are, where it's illegal to sell milk, where you can buy a herd share, so you can invest in the farm. The reason that all of these things work, all these techniques, is because they are technically not a sale.
Right.
And the government, the courts recognize that if a consumer shares risk, then it's technically not a sale. When you go into Walmart and buy, well, if you go into Walmart, hopefully you don't, but if you did, and you went in there and you took stuff off the shelf, you don't have any risk in that product in getting there. In other words, somebody took all the investment risk to design it, produce it, process it, distribute it, and get it on that shelf. You just went in and, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and picked, and picked one off the shelf.
Right.
That is a sale. But if you invest in that company, outfit, whatever, to where that product is pre-invested, to where you might lose your investment if the farm goes under. Your money doesn't come back to you if you've invested in it.
Right.
Then it's actually deemed not a sale, and therefore comes under a lot of these codes.
Sure.
That's number one. To conceive of ways where you don't have to do the regulatory stuff, or the sales stuff.
Right.
Another idea or element is to realize that many times the bureaucracy doesn't actually understand the law, or there are nice big loopholes in it that they haven't conceived of. I'll give you an example. On-farm processing of poultry. Many times there is the consumer producer exemption that allows you to do 20,000 birds, but some states are worse than that, more regulatory than that, and some states have made pretty technical requirements. Well, one of our former apprentices, who went back home in Oregon, built an outdoor processing facility like we have, and the state came in and told him it was illegal. And so he got to looking at the law, and it said, he had to have these impermeable walls and all, and so and screens on his windows. Mm-hmm. Well, he had an open air facility like we do, and they demanded impermeable walls and window screens. Mm-hmm. So what he noticed was that the regulations did not say how high the walls had to be. So instead of doing what the bureaucrats assumed that he would do, he built 8-inch walls and went down to Home Depot and got patio doors and sliding window doors and put those on as his walls. And it didn't say how big the windows had to be, you see. So what he had was an 8-inch wall and these great big windows it had a screen, and so he was able to comply. They had to pass him, even though what he did was completely opposite what they expected. There was a guy in Ohio, same situation. What he did, he built a little hoop house, covered it up with plastic. They came out, well, this is not walls, blah, blah, blah. He said, look, your regulation says impermeable walls. He took a garden hose, sprayed it on the plastic hoop house, and he said, you see any water coming out the other side? Those are impermeable walls. They had to pass him.
Wow, that's excellent.
And so there are actually numerous things that you can do, that you can push in order to move past some of these things.
Sure. What wonderful suggestions. And I think it is so important to continue to focus on the fact that there are always ways around a lot of these, regulations and laws that make things seem impossible, but there's always a way. I tell people that, don't ever get too worried about big government, because the inefficiency of government will save us.
Yeah.
There's no way that they can carry out everything that they want to do. There's not enough enforcement, there's not enough compliance, and there is always hope for individual freedom and sovereignty if you're willing to work for it.
Yes, and on that note, yes, you're really speaking my language. I always tell people that when you're dealing with the bureaucracy, require if they tell you what you're doing is wrong, whatever, then tell them we're not going to talk. We're going to write to each other, and that will slow them down by a year, because they realize that if they put something in writing, then it actually becomes litigious. It actually becomes a matter of record.
Right.
And so the bureaucrats love to call you or visit you and talk and tell you what you're doing is wrong. They balk at putting it in writing. And numerous times in the past, when I've been told, well, you can't do that, you can't do this, I say, well, send me the code and put it in writing, and then you never hear from them.
Right.
And so that will either they either retreat, or at least they slow way down, which is a good thing.
It is a good thing.
And so you're right. The very bulkiness of the bureaucracy creates an extremely slow moving kind of thing.
Absolutely. Which is good for us.
Yes, it absolutely is. Mm-hmm.
Well, Mr. Salatin, lastly, what can we do as people who fully appreciate how you are celebrating your sovereignty? What can we do to participate and benefit your farm, your book sales, and other outreach to support your excellent work?
Well, that sounds like a come on for an advertisement or something.
We want to support you, and I want to figure out more ways to get the word out.
Yeah. Well, I think there are a couple things. I mean, one is we do have a website, and that's one thing. But secondly, absolutely, I've written 9 books. The Everything I Want to Do is Illegal. That one right there can. I've even seen that read by my liberal friends, and they completely convert to like libertarianism. I mean, it's because here's the thing: it's written in a very story readable style. It's not written by an attorney,
right?
And so it's a story. It's a readable storybook, and you can just follow it along, and it's something any layman, any person can understand, and it will absolutely revolutionize somebody's thinking about government intervention or intrusion.
Sure.
That's one thing. Another thing is that I do speak a lot of places around the country, and if you're getting ready to do a conference or something, we'd entertain the ability to come and do a presentation on some of these issues, so that people are informed and educated about the thought process and how to go forward with these things. But the easiest way certainly is get the books. You can get them in volume, and give them to friends as presents and whatever. And there's a lot of information there. The book Folks This Ain't Normal, which is another one.
That's good.
Folks This Ain't Normal. It's not expensive, and there again, the theme of that book is not whatever regulatory, but there is a lot in there about the burdensome regulatory nature. And interestingly, that book also has converted liberal folks to take a different view toward intrusive government policy as being the most the most efficacious answer to things that people don't like. I always tell people, I'm not an anarchist. There definitely is a role for government.
Sure.
But generally speaking, when there are societal issues that need a solution, the first repository of a solution is not the government. The first repository lies with communities, with ourselves as individuals, and the free market.
Absolutely. Well, that is a phenomenal conclusion to what we're certainly trying to do at Rebellion.life and educating people about what sovereignty means. And I love how you said how there is a role for government, but this top-down approach that we've tried for a long time isn't working. What can we do here in our communities to have a bottom-up approach, and that way there's it accounts for the diversity in all of these different geographical, economical, social settings. Just there's not a one-size-fits-all approach for any policy, in my opinion, but especially agricultural policy.
Yes. Well, the truth is that we have as a culture, we have arrogated to the federal level many, many, many things that used to be done at the state and local level.
Right.
And as a result, we have reduced policy innovation from trying numerous things in governance. We have reduced the innovation and the diversity in our centralized approach. And so when you arrogate to the federal level, not only do you reduce innovation, but you also make the stakes so high. As in a winner-take-all deal, the stakes are so high that there's a tremendous amount resting on the fancies of the federal officials. And so when people complain about all the lobbyists and the special interests and all that stuff, the fact is that the federal government had nothing to sell, or then there would be nobody down there to buy.
Exactly.
And so if all of that power were put back in the states and the localities, all the lobbyists and the special interests would dry up because there wouldn't be anything for sale in Washington.
Exactly. That is so powerful. Well, Mr. Salatin, thank you again so much for taking the time. It's an honor to speak to you after reading several of your books and knowing about what you do. And we're certainly going to try and do something here in the Roaring Fork Valley to bring you to speak at some point. So,
great.
Thank you so much.
I'll look forward to it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.